It is now my great honor to introduce a true friend of ICPHSO,
Thanks.
CPSC Acting Chairman of the Consumer Product Safety Commission, Bob Adler. Bob has been acting chairman since October 2019 and has been a commissioner at the agency since 2009. His term ends in October of this year. Bob is no stranger to most of our attendees who have had the privilege of hearing him as both a keynote speaker and as a panelist talking business ethics and senior safety, among other subjects during past ICPHSO conferences. We appreciate the time Bob takes out of his schedule for ICPHSO and for also allowing us to have Shelby Mathis as our ex officio board member of our board. Further, we can't thank Bob and CPSC senior leaders enough for their continued participation in our CPSC morning, which was started initially by ICPHSO founding member David Schmelzer, as a way to break down the barriers between regulators and the regulated entities. True to Dave's vision 28 years ago, CPSC continues to train, educate, and network at our conferences, whether in person or virtual as we are today. Acting Chairman Adler, the speaker box is now yours.
Good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure to appear before you today, even if we're doing it virtually. It's been a rough year on multiple fronts, but I'm hopeful that 2021 will be much happier and healthier for all of us. So at the outset, I'd like to recognize and thank a number of folks for putting together such a wonderful conference in the face of numerous pandemic challenges. And as always, I first note Mark Schoem, who I think has been the executive director of ICPHSO for 5.5 years, and that's been 5.5 years of superb leadership. So Mark, thank you for all of your wonderful work. And Rick Rosati, ICPHSO president, it's been a tough year and you've performed extremely well. So thank you for all of your good efforts. Andy Church, who's been the symposium planning chair and is the incoming president of ICPHSO. Andy, I look forward to getting to know you. And I have to thank Erin Cole, who is ICPHSO's meeting manager. She's helped get me through a lot of the technical challenges that I ineptly have created for myself. The problem is computers do what I tell them to, not what I want them to do. And that's been a huge challenge. So thank you, Erin. And I have to thank Shelby Mathis, who is CPSC's Small Business Ombudsman. She is the liaison to ICPHSO, and she's done just a magnificent job as always. So Shelby, thanks. And I'd like to take a moment, just a quick moment, for a personal comment, and that has to do with David Schmelzer, who passed away very recently. Most folks who've been involved with ICPHSO have known David over the years. He's been one of the staunchest and most dedicated supporters of ICPHSO, and I think that's helped make this such a tremendously successful organization. I met David when I was at CPSC, even before he came to the agency. And I do remember that first meeting in which I said, this is one of the sweetest, most dedicated, and smartest people that I had met. And it was a pleasure to know him. I also have to admit that I loved it when he regaled us about stories of his childhood in Brooklyn. And that was a tradition that, to my delight, I continued when I came back to CPSC. David and Alan Shaken, former employee at CPSC, and I used to get together at the Pines of Rome and gossip, but talk about the good old days. And of course, David always had a million Brooklyn stories. So I just want to pay tribute to him, and I want to urge folks to consider giving to the David Schmelzer Scholarship Fund to help folks attend and participate in ICPHSO activities. I think that's a very worthwhile activity. Okay, so today I'd like to provide an update on developments at CPSC for the past year and to discuss some of the challenges we face in the upcoming year. But first, a quick personal update. I think most of you know, but in case not, I still plan to retire at the end of my term in October. I will have been at the commission as a commissioner for 12 years. Now there's a possibility that I might spill into my holdover year, but I'm actually looking forward to leaving the CPSC in good hands with a permanent chair and a full complement of commissioners. And it dawned on me, I've spent almost 50 years working at, overseeing, or writing about CPSC. And those have been great years. But I'm going to be 77 years old when my term expires. I realize that means I'm too young to be president, but I think I've put in enough years. I think it's time to hang up my safety spurs and to move on. And my intention is to do some teaching and writing about topics that interest me, always product safety, but also ethics and negotiation. Some of you may recall last year, under different circumstances, when I spoke to ICPHSO, I used a metaphor, and that was caretaker, because I'd just become the acting chair. I felt committed to maintaining a degree of continuity at the agency, given my status as acting chair. And so we awaited the arrival of a new chair, and we awaited some direction from on high, neither of which occurred. So we didn't sit idly by. I think we worked and we achieved, and I think we got a lot accomplished. So anyway, here we are 16 months later, and we have a new administration. And I think it's fair to say they view product safety in different terms. So I'm going to modify the metaphor from caretaker to gardener. So what does that mean? Well, first and foremost, it means to me that CPSC must break free from the prison of incremental budgeting that has plagued us for decades. In fact, for all of our existence. Every gardener knows that nothing can flourish without rich soil, and goodness knows we've been planting in poor soil for our entire existence. So I have profound hope, and that is instead of having our OMB friends and our appropriators simply look at our existing budget, add a few dollars to it sometimes, which, by the way, doesn't always cover our increased costs from pay increases and inflation. It's my hope that they'll understand that we have a strong need for an exponential increase in funds in order for us to do our job well. And I'm going to make a few points of comparison to illustrate that. I think you've all read that CPSC has jurisdiction over 15,000 product categories. I've never counted them, but it's a massive amount of product categories. It may well be the broadest jurisdiction of any federal health and safety agency. It's just not clear, but it's a massive and broad jurisdiction. The one thing that's indisputable is that with our budget of $135 million, we are by far the smallest of any of the federal health and safety regulatory agencies. In other words, we're the poster child for start poor, stay poor. And I'm not sure to laugh or cry when I look at some of the other agencies and their budgets. Consider our sister agency, FDA. They have a budget that's 44 times what CPSC's is. And by the way, this was before COVID arrived. They claim on their website to be a bargain for the American public at an expenditure of about $10 a person. And mind you, they are a bargain. But if FDA is a bargain, then we're a steal, since CPSC costs about 40 cents per person. And let me compare us to another sister agency with a budget closer to ours, NHTSA. They still weigh in at about $1 billion a year, which is roughly 7 times larger than CPSC's budget. And I'm not going to get into gruesome detail, but if you look to see the number of annual deaths and injuries that they must address, CPSC's fatalities and injuries is larger. In fact, it's not only larger than NHTSA, it's larger than OSHA or the Mine Safety and Health Administration, which I guess some people call MSHA, but it's a broader set of injuries and fatalities than almost any of the other federal health and safety agencies, all of which have bigger budgets than CPSC. And yes, I know FDA is dealing with 500,000 deaths, which is why I'm not comparing us to FDA in that respect. I'm not criticizing the funding of other agencies. I think that's money well spent. But what I want to say is there's no good reason for CPSC to be on such a starvation diet. So I finally got tired of searching for pennies under our cushions. So as one commissioner, I just sent a letter to the Office of Management and Budget asking for a budget to me that's more closely aligned with the demands of the 21st century. To me, that requires a budget of roughly $280 million with a one-time infrastructure adjustment cost of roughly $90 million. Wow. If that sounds aggressive because it's more than doubling our current budget, I'm going to ask you to consider this. Even if we were to get every penny that I think we need, we would still be the smallest health and safety regulatory agency in the federal government. In other words, I think it's long past time for Congress to properly prioritize product safety. The victims of product safety mishaps, far too many of whom are children, deserve a future in which the agency is funded appropriately to prevent more tragedies like theirs. So what would we do with the added resources? Oh my gosh, lots of things. But to begin with, we'd tackle the unfunded mandates. Let me repeat that, unfunded mandates that were recently given to us in the Omnibus COVID Relief Act. That's now in law. I call that COVID-1. These include projects like expanding our import resources, developing a standard for flame arresters for portable fuel containers, implementing an upholstered furniture standard, TB117, and studies and reports on carbon monoxide detectors. In other words, a bunch of extra work, not an extra penny to do that work. I know everybody, or at least I assume everybody's following the new COVID Relief Act, the $1.9 trillion, which I call COVID-2, that's pending before Congress. There is a provision in COVID-2 that if it passes would provide funding to cover the added responsibilities given to us in COVID-1. And boy, will I be grateful for that. But I need to emphasize that added funding comes with some limits on what we can do with the money, and it still won't solve our ongoing perennial budget problems. And let me just point to our recently approved FY21 operating plan. To me, that's as ambitious as anything I can recall in my years as a commissioner. It has lots of projects for mandatory standards. And let me just mention a few of these. Infant sleep products, crib mattresses, crib bumpers, clothing storage units, also known as dressers, carbon monoxide hazards from portable gas generators and from furnaces, high power magnets, table saws, window coverings. And that's not addressing the issues of chronic hazards from things like organohalogen flame retardants, possibly crumb rubber, and maybe PFAS coming down the pike in the future. In other words, it's a massive and ambitious workload. And if we're going to do that, we also have to pay attention to my favorite approach to solving safety problems, which is voluntary standards. And let me just mention some of the dozens of voluntary standards projects that we've got. Booster seats, child-resistant packaging, carriages and strollers, infant bathtubs, battery fires, clothes dryer fires, flammable refrigerants, liquid laundry packets, and on and on. And of course, depending on the progress of these voluntary standards or the lack thereof, any of those could turn into mandatory standards proceedings. And by the way, vice versa. Anyway, if we're going to address these priorities in a timely and effective manner, we're going to need additional resources for epidemiology, engineering, health sciences, human factors, law, and elsewhere. In fact, everywhere. So I'm trying to be as transparent about what I consider the agency's budget plight as I can. I'm hopeful that it will resonate with our friends and stakeholders who've worked with us over the years and garnered their support. Anyway, let me continue building on my gardening metaphor. So if resources are the soil, the agency still needs careful tending. As I see it, that means we need at least two significant legislative changes that would make the agency function as it should. You're not going to be surprised to hear me say the first of these is to unshackle the agency from the information the information muzzle found in Section 6B of the CPSA. I'm not going to repeat the many criticisms I have of 6B because I suspect most people in this audience have heard them before. But I do want to say that year after year after year, I've heard the concern that if 6B were abolished, we'd be left with an agency that would run rampant with misinformation about companies. That's the concern. Let me address that concern, and I'm going to be very blunt. I'm not sure it's any more real than Bigfoot. Somehow, every other agency in the federal government manages to function fairly and fully without restrictions similar to those in Section 6B. And by the way, it's not the agency that suffers, it's the public that suffers from limits or watered down releases of safety information. It's to protect the public. The other legislative change we need is what I would call pruning, to continue the metaphor. We really need less cumbersome rulemaking of the sort that was added to our statutes some 40 years ago, and that has resulted in a massive slowdown in agency rulemaking. I remember the claims that were made. These procedures, these mandatory findings would produce better rules. Well, I think 40 years of history show that all they've done is produce fewer rules, not better rules, not rules with any observable improvements, just slower rules. And slower rule development means more injuries and more fatalities to the public. So anyway, that said, I want to be clear. If we don't get the funding, if we don't get the change to our statutory requirements, obviously we're going to work and move on. We're going to do as many safety standards. We're going to do as many port inspections, recalls, voluntary standards collaboration, warning and educating the public. We're going to do all of that as much as we can. In fact, we're going to use every option we have to make consumers safer, which includes using our dedicated compliance enforcement team to their fullest extent. And I must say, I'm delighted that with the reorganization of compliance and enforcement, we are working much more effectively, efficiently, and expeditiously. And let me drop a special note here. I'm proud to say that after what I thought was an unnecessary hiatus of several years, we've begun seeking civil penalties again, which has culminated in 2 recent penalty settlements. And by the way, I'm proud not because we're in the business of racking up civil penalty counts or adding those as pelts on the wall. And this is where my esteemed colleague, Commissioner Biacco, correctly reminds me we're not in the business of just piling up civil penalty settlements. We do it because if they're done thoughtfully, civil penalties are a necessary part of any properly run enforcement agency. And by the way, I feel the same way about unilateral press releases and administrative litigation. They're tools that have been given to us that we're obligated to use when the need arises and that we will use. So is that all that's going on? No, there's more. Our communications team, of which I'm extremely proud, has been doing terrific work. They continue to deliver great advice and safety information in the form of education campaigns. They've done clear and urgent and well-drafted recall announcements, and they continue with the social media memes that I still don't really get, but everyone assures me they not only have a cult following, but they're very effective. But that continues, and I'm proud of them. Also, our research and standard setting staff, known to insiders as EXHR, continue to test products, analyze data, draft regulatory proposals, and they managed to do so even during the dark and early days of the pandemic lockdown, when we had to reduce staff access to our lab. And I just wanted to make one quick announcement because folks have been asking this of us a lot. National Consumer Protection Week is coming up in March. So one of the highlights of that for us is we're going to release a snapshot from NICE, National Electronic Injury Surveillance System, that a lot of people have been requesting. And that's going to compare injury data from March through September of 2020 to the same months pre-pandemic to highlight what the effects of the pandemic are. I've sort of alluded to those, but this will be a much more detailed picture that will show in some areas where injuries and fatalities may have increased, in other areas where they've decreased. And of course, because of COVID, we know there are many fewer visits to emergency rooms. At any rate, that will be published during National Consumer Protection Week. And we're going to continue mining that data to see whether we need to take additional steps to protect consumers during the pandemic crisis. So just to round out the metaphor, I hope we garden this agency the way Matt Damon grew potatoes on Mars in the movie The Martian, which I loved. We're going to take what little we have and we're going to use every tool at our disposal to get the job done. I'm going to digress for just a second to mention two additional priorities that are not directly safety related, but I think are absolutely key to an effective agency. The first is diversity. And I don't just mean that our little agency should look more like the American people we serve. We must do that. I mean that we have to take every opportunity to approach product safety from a variety of diverse viewpoints. For example, some important questions. How might certain hazards exist for some vulnerable populations more than others? How might real-life barriers like socioeconomic status affect our safety messages and people's ability to respond to them? What methods can we use to reach marginalized and underserved communities? It's asking and answering these questions where the crucial work of diversity is done, and that's what we're committed to doing. In fact, for this year's mid-year priorities, and I must say under the gentle prodding of my colleague, Commissioner Kay, I've directed staff to present ideas that continue to expand our longstanding commitment to diversity. So please stay tuned. The second key component to a properly functioning agency, and I think a key to our success, and this isn't going to surprise anybody who knows me, is civility. Here, I want to second something I heard President Biden declare a few weeks ago when he swore in 1,000 new appointees to the federal government. In a nutshell, he said that if he ever discovered staff treating others with disrespect, he'd fire them on the spot. Needless to say, I love that degree of accountability, and I hope he stays true to it. I too believe that we should always operate with civility and treat each other with respect. And it's something I've always tried to do, and I've always insisted that people who work around me do. These are qualities that are extremely important to me, and they should be to everyone who operates in the commission or with the commission. And now, because I've been there 50 years, I thought I would reflect a little bit and share a few observations I have about product safety. So I promise I won't dwell on all of them, but here are a couple. First, as recent news would suggest, I think we're returning to a period in which people recognize that regulations, despite their faults and failings, can dramatically improve the nation's safety, well-being, and fairness. Granted, I'd never claim that all rulemaking's good, but I strongly object to the notion that it's always bad. Instead, I suggest society's constantly trying to balance two competing dynamics: markets that are imperfect versus regulation that is imperfect. That's the real world picture of regulation. But here I want to inject a note of realism. Sorry, folks, anyone who believes that markets always produce optimal societal outcomes without the need for regulation lives in a dream world, where dangerous products, fraudulent practices, abusive monopolies, and climate change always sort themselves out in the long run. They don't. And please forgive a frustrated observation. I think I've made this before. I've found that when folks that I consider to be free market ideologues encounter a regulation that by all accounts operates effectively, invariably they insist, well, it may work in practice, but it still doesn't work in theory. On the other hand, and let's be clear, even rules drawn with the best of intention and the greatest of skill rarely come without costs and occasional unintended consequences. And here's a sad example. Years ago, we discovered that our rule that was promoting reduced flammability for children's sleepwear led to the use of potentially toxic flame retardants, which undercut any safety benefits from the rule. That's the occasional unintended consequence of product safety. So in short, markets are flawed human institutions, despite occasional fantasies by some that they're divinely ordained. They're not. Similarly, regulations, like all of us, are human and fallible. And I did want to say, as I've learned over the years, the work of regulators is hard, endless, and anything but sexy. And for those who are content to toil behind the scenes, and I include myself in that group, I want to urge you to watch Bill Maher. He did a tribute to my former boss, Congressman Henry Waxman, on HBO, and it's on HBO January 30th, and you can all look it up. It's funny, it's moving, and it's spot on about the difference between being a workhorse and a show horse. So with those thoughts in mind, let me add that I believe, for the most part, safety rules have really been a great success story. And I said this at ICPHSO last year. But when I reflect on decades of product safety regulation, I think extraordinary progress has been made across the board, and not just at CPSC. As I said at ICPHSO last year, the US population has increased dramatically in the last 50 years. But if you look at fatalities from consumer products, they've plummeted. And I think that's due in large part, not entirely, but in large part to safety rules. And I remind you, we've seen over an 80% reduction in childhood fatalities from poisoning. We've seen over a 90% reduction in crib fatalities. And my favorite standard, the Refrigerator Safety Act, it still appears that we've seen a 100% reduction in deaths from kids climbing into abandoned refrigerators, closing the doors, and suffocating. So I do think safety rules have been very, very productive and helpful to our society. That doesn't mean there's any cause for dropping our guard or reducing our efforts to promote product safety. Frankly, as long as we have entrepreneurs who dream up new products, or we have chemists who develop new concoctions, we're always going to have emerging safety hazards, and there's always going to be a need for an agency like Consumer Product Safety Commission. But here, I want to remind us all of what I call the great safety paradox. Namely, the more successful we are in reducing deaths and injuries, the less anybody notices. Babies that don't suffocate in cribs or die from swallowing toxic prescription drugs never tell anyone that their lives were saved by a government regulation. And rarely do people recognize how profoundly safer they are than generations before. But we, and by the way, I include a lot of the folks in this audience at ICPHSO who are friends and stakeholders. The work that we've done to produce and advance safety, we know what we've done. I'm extremely grateful to CPSC staff and to all of our friends at ICPHSO who've worked to advance product safety. And by the way, there's a flip, and it's a dark side to this paradox. Sometimes you don't get necessary safety measures until tragedy strikes, and just reflect on this over the years. 146 young women died in the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire in 1911 in New York. And it wasn't until these ghastly deaths that were observed by thousands and thousands of people that New York finally acted to promote fire safety and impose new building codes. And for those of us who remember Dalcon Shield IUDs, in the mid-70s, these left thousands of women sterile or with lifetime pelvic damage. And it wasn't until that scandal that Congress finally moved to enact medical device amendments of 1976. And of course, I want to remind everybody that the Consumer Product Safety Improvement Act wouldn't have been passed in 2008 had there not been a flood of toys with high lead levels imported into the country. In short, tragedies often lead to enhanced and overdue regulatory authority, and that's a hell of a way to promote safety. I keep saying there's got to be a better way. So it's my ongoing plea to the folks at ICPHSO to work for safety reforms that don't stem from great national tragedies that are ghastly, that we all work to develop measured and effective safety measures that will protect the public. So in closing, I want to assure you that I'm going to be around for a while, not until October and perhaps beyond, but I'm going to be doing my best to make CPSC the strongest, not so little agency that I can. But more importantly, you're going to have CPSC's incredibly dedicated staff that's going to continue to do what I consider superhuman efforts to protect all consumers. So I want to thank you for listening to my remarks, and I want to urge everybody to stay healthy. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Acting Chairman Adler. I would now like to introduce Mary Boyle, who is the Executive Director of the Consumer Product Safety Commission. Prior to her being Executive Director, Mary served in the Commission's Office of the General Counsel as the Deputy General Counsel. Mary, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone. It's wonderful to be here today at the annual ICPHSO meeting. First, I do want to extend my thanks to Andy and Mark Schoem and Rick Rosati for all of their efforts to make today possible. This is my third time addressing you in my capacity as Executive Director. And thinking about today's program, I reflected on my previous remarks. And I think at least one thing is clear. My tenure in this role has been anything but routine. The first time I addressed the group, we had just emerged from the longest government shutdown in history. And last year at this time, I mentioned that the agency had been touched by world events because our staff had been evacuated from the embassy in Beijing due to the coronavirus. Little did I know what would soon follow. Like all of you in your work lives and in your personal lives, this has been a challenging time for CPSC, especially for staff who have experienced the devastating impact of COVID themselves and in their families. But through it all, I can report that CPSC staff has steadfastly kept its focus on fulfilling the CPSC mission and that we are operating full steam ahead. We are at the ports, preventing violative products from entering our country. We are testing products at our world-class lab. We are developing rulemakings and recalling products. We are conducting investigations nationwide, and we are surveilling online platforms. We are holding webinars on important safety issues and communicating our message to wide audiences. The Small Business Ombudsman is fielding your calls and questions, and our Consumer Ombudsman is engaging with consumers in new and dynamic ways. In short, the CPSC is executing its mission robustly and vigorously. We may be doing some things differently, but we are doing them no less well and with no less of a sense of purpose or dedication. I am incredibly proud of the CPSC staff. In addition to the changes necessitated by the transition to remote work, last year also brought some other changes and new personnel whom I'd like to recognize today. As many of you know, Gib Mullen was affiliated with CPSC in one capacity or another for over 2 decades, and he retired as General Counsel in January. Luckily for us, Jen Solt, in normal role as Deputy Director of Compliance, graciously agreed to step into the Acting General Counsel position during this transition period. You will be hearing from Jen later as part of the Ask CPSC panel. In addition to the GC position, we also have a new head of the Congressional Affairs Office. Carla McGarvey, who has extensive experience working on Capitol Hill, joined the agency in January, and she has hit the ground running. I'm also pleased to announce that we have made a number of changes at our laboratory to strengthen our staff there, including a new director for health sciences, Mary Kelleher. Mark Kumagai is now leading engineering sciences, and Caroline Paul has been named the new director of mechanical and combustion engineering. They are terrific additions to our leadership team and bring expertise and knowledge that is a crucial part of our science-based decision-making approach. So there has been a fair amount of change since I last addressed you. What has not changed, however, is our commitment to the agency mission and the execution of Commission priorities. Those priorities are reflected in the agency's operating plan, which the Commission approved in October. Acting Chair Adler touched on a number of the projects laid out in the plan, and you will be hearing in depth about some of these issues from our leadership team, who will be answering your questions during the Ask CPSC panel. But I would like to take a moment to highlight a few priorities. In the compliance area, priorities include a focus on increasing online surveillance and enforcement and strengthening the Internet Surveillance Unit, improving the Fast Track program, expanding and strengthening the Enforcement and Litigation Division to support substantial product hazard investigations, administrative litigation, and civil penalty investigations, and focusing on regulatory enforcement in toy labeling, PPPA, bicycle helmets, durable nursery products, and ATV action plans. In the area of hazard reduction, priorities include improving the data quality of the National Electronic Injury Surveillance System, a continued focus on protecting children, and to that end, we plan to complete proposed rules on furniture tip-overs, hazardous magnet sets, and window coverings, and final rules on infant sleep products, crib bumpers, and crib mattresses. We also are scheduled to complete an advance notice of proposed rulemaking on fire and debris penetration hazards in off-highway vehicles. And we're continuing work to improve our data analytic capabilities so that we can better identify emerging trends. And in the import world, staff is implementing the first stages of an e-commerce plan, including providing port staff dedicated exclusively to this issue. We are also implementing the recent statutory direction from Congress related to import surveillance, and we're developing plans to execute an e-filing program authorized by a unanimous vote of the Commission at the end of last year. As you can see, the agency agenda for the year is quite full and covers a wide range of issues. Staff is energized by this important work and is committed to keeping consumers safe despite the challenges we all continue to face as a result of the pandemic. And as focused on this year's operating plan as we are already making plans for next year. And that starts with the agency's priorities hearing, where the Commission invites stakeholders to share views on the agency's agenda and priorities for fiscal year 22. The hearing will be held virtually on April 7th, and I encourage all stakeholders to participate, either through oral presentations or by submitting written comments. Comments are due to the Commission by March 17th. Thank you again for giving me the opportunity to speak to you this morning. I'm so proud and fortunate to work with an amazing and dedicated group of CPSC staff, and I know you will find the following panels informative and thought-provoking, and I look forward to seeing you all in person next year. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mary. And now we will turn it over to our ex officio board member in CPSC Small Business Ombudsman, Shelby Mathis, to moderate our next session, Dynamic Communications with the CPSC.
Thank you for joining us, everybody. Welcome to the Dynamic Communications with the CPSC. This is going to be a three-part session, and the first up is Joe Mardiak.
Thank you, Shelby. Good morning, everybody. It's great to be here to be able to tell you a little bit about what's been going on in communications at the CPSC. Our fundamental goal is to get reliable information out there and have it be accessible to our stakeholders and in a timely way. We want to make sure that our outreach and our messaging gets to the affected populations, and in particular, the vulnerable communities. We do this through about 300 press releases about recalls, as well as 24 safety education campaigns. Well, let's take a look at last year just to see where we've been. And I have to say, last year was arguably the best year ever for communications at CPSC. I want to call out a huge thanks to our team, the communications team, for the extraordinary effort that they made last year. I'm going to throw out some numbers, but it's just to give you a flavor of what we're talking about. I'm going to compare last year to the previous year. For example, social media is very important, and our followers had been 10,000 the year before. Last year, 150,000. As far as engagements are concerned, and this is important, people reacting to our social media. Previously, it was 1.5 million. Last year, it was 12 million. On some of our bigger campaigns, like the holiday safety, we went from 300 million impressions to 512 million impressions. And then we went from 6,000 engagements to 14,000 engagements. For the Super Bowl Anchor It campaign, we had gone from 6 million impressions to 475 million impressions. And we had gone from 700 engagements to 11,000 engagements. So you can see the effort that the team was making last year. And this is in spite of COVID, which caused us to change a lot of our plans. And we had to put a special campaign on for COVID with special checklists, with a website, with satellite media tours, and this continues on now. Well, last year we were focused on some innovative ideas, and what we wanted to look into was some paid social media advertising, the use of listicles, as well as the multimedia news releases. We used influencers last year in a big way, and then we also wrapped up a survey on our Anchor It campaign to find out really what the audience is saying. Are they getting the message? Do they like the way they're getting it? And are they doing something about it? We used that to inform the new PSA that we created. And that new PSA was innovative in the sense that we just used nanny cam video, real life situations with parents. Another innovation that we had last year was with our Pool Safely video, which will be coming out this year, and that is we put animation for the first time into the video. So that's some of last year, a snapshot. What about this year? Well, our priorities are similar. Innovation is at the top of the list. For the satellite media tour we just did on Anchor It, we involved a parent who had had a near tragedy be part of those interviews, 35 interviews she participated in. We did Spanish this year for the first time. We hadn't done it last year. We did paid advertising, again, on social media for the first time on this campaign, and we went from 4,000 engagements last year to 422,000 engagements. The impressions last year to this year, it went from 3 million to 27 million. And here's a very interesting thing. We also used over-the-top approach to get the message out. What this means basically is on streaming platforms like Hulu, NBC Peacock, Sling, or YouTube TV, when you're watching a show and there's a commercial, our PSA on Anchor It was running as the commercial. Now, we didn't embed it because of the content of the program. We did it because an algorithm told us who we could go to that was going to be watching. In other words, parents with young kids at home. In addition to them seeing it, and we had 1.3 million people see the PSA, when those same people then went onto the web to browse, an ad would come up to tell them about the Anchor It website. So it was a terrific, new, innovative thing that we tried. As far as our recall emails go, they're a little wordy and they're a little difficult to read, and so we're going to be doing a revamp on the template and the design of it, basically so that people can read it, get it, and do it. A key factor going into this year is going to be diversity. Now, last year we tried to be diversified in the actors that we were using in our PSAs. This year, we're expanding on that. For example, with our social media, we've already included LGBTQ individuals as well as disabled individuals in our graphics. In our Pool Safely, we've been focused on the culture and the community and the messaging and the statistics that we have specific to that community. So we're looking to really expand on that. Spanish, again, will be a big bump up this year. All the paid social media advertising that we do in all the campaigns, 1/3 of that will be dedicated to Spanish. And we hope to look into some other interesting ideas yet in this year. For example, perhaps doing some advertising in public transportation in some pilot cities and pilot communities where the dependence on public transportation in those vulnerable communities is immense. Now, we are also going to be working this year on our websites. The saferproducts.gov has already gotten a redesign, and we're going to be doing a marketing effort on that later this year to get people to realize it and to use it. And finally, with the CPSC.gov website, I know there are things that need to be fixed on that, and we are doing a major redesign and overhaul, if you will, of the website this year. Why? To make it more user-friendly, to make it more searchable, for the business education page, for example, to make it more organized and easier to browse, and to make it also even more so mobile-friendly. Those are some of the activities we've got planned for this year, and I have to say, with a great team, I think we're going to hit a lot of these right out of the park. Well, to help us get the message out there, the new Consumer Ombudsman is there to help us get these messages from OCM out to the public and to a larger network of the public. And so I yield back the balance of my time, as they say in Congress, and I recognize the kind gentleman from Maryland, Jonathan Midget.
Thanks very much, Joe. It's always a pleasure to address ICPHSO. I know everybody here in the audience is interested in public health and safety, so it's like preaching to the choir. It's just a marvelous opportunity. I want to talk this morning about the benefits of having the consumer voice represented in your voluntary standards activities. So as the new consumer ombudsman, my mission is actually to bring the consumer perspective to the agency and the agency's perspective to consumers. So I cannot tell you how valuable the consumer perspective is to making voluntary standards. Consumers bring real-world experiences to the table. They have insights into the critical incidents that are driving the conversations that we have in voluntary standards development. The critical incidents, that's human factors jargon for the incident that's really changing the discussion and driving changes that make the world a better place. So consumers help experts understand foreseeable use and foreseeable misuse in a way that perhaps the experts might not be able to voice. And consumers also can explain how they expect their products to perform in everyday life. And those user expectations are dramatically helpful when you're planning interventions to prevent injuries. So those insights bring some clarity to the discussion, and they bring some credibility too. Now you say, well, how do they make it more credible? Well, actually, next slide for me there, Shelby. Having a balanced committee with all the stakeholders represented is a requirement. The U.S. standard strategy emphasizes openness and impartiality, and it strives for getting everybody who's involved in using a standard in the business of talking about how to make the standard better. And of course, everybody knows ANSI's essential requirements call out balance as a very important principle. We want all stakeholder groups to be balanced, and if we can't achieve perfect balance, we strive hard to reach it. Circular A119 is an executive branch document which tells of the high regard the U.S. government holds for balance of interest in the standards development process. Next slide. The trick, of course, is how do we get consumers involved? Because they're volunteers. It's hard to get volunteers. I recommend having an ongoing outreach campaign with your voluntary standards network. Make sure that people are always looking for someone who might be able to participate in that regard from the consumer groups. And you need to facilitate participation using electronic collaboration tools for easy communications. One of the interesting outcomes of having a pandemic is people are becoming more comfortable with collaboration spaces such as we're using right now. And that's going to be only just better for enhancing consumer participation in voluntary standards. It's just going to be a real benefit. You need to quickly educate newcomers to the process in the jargon that is thrown around in a voluntary standards arena. And you need to have materials ready for them to learn about what's going on. And I can't emphasize how useful it is to have a couple of mentors ready in the wings to assign to a new consumer who's just learning the ropes. Mentors are incredibly helpful. And of course, monetary assistance is money well spent to get consumers to the table. And there are scholarships and grants available, we know, but sometimes the consumers don't know they're there, and that can be a drawback for them for participating. Next slide. So what can the consumer ombudsman at the CPSC do for you? So I'm available to help you find consumers with my ever-expanding network of consumers and consumer groups. And I can provide basic information about standards to them and explanations of what's going on in the process in plain language. I'm an educational psychologist, so I can teach you anything. I'm also building a portfolio of training materials that you will find eventually on my webpage, which is at cpsc.gov. And if you go to the top right corner of our homepage and pull down that hamburger menu, you will see basically all the main pages that we have for the cpsc.gov, and Consumer Ombudsman is listed there next to Congressional Affairs. I can also be a dedicated point of contact for consumers you have following the standard, contact to the agency. Feel free to give my information to any consumers who are interested in participating in voluntary standards, and I'll help any way that I can to help them to learn what they can do in that process and how they can help. And finally, I'll be engaging in my own outreach efforts to try and recruit consumers to the voluntary standards process and hopefully be able to enhance the balance that we have in the voluntary standards community right now. So I look forward to working with everybody in the future. And now I think that we can turn the presentation over to Phil Bermel, our Fast Track Program Supervisor, and Shelby Mathis, our Small Business Ombudsman. Shelby and Phil, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. And, a good moderator would have started the session by saying, if you have questions, we're going to take them at the end and you can submit them via the ICPHSO app. So please do so. Welcome. I'm Shelby Mathis. I'm the Small Business Ombudsman, and joining me this morning is Phil.
Hi, good morning, everybody. My name is Phil Bermel. I'm the supervisor of the Fast Track Recall team at CPSC.
And for this third part of today's session, we're going to talk about a bit of a preview of the Fast Track portal update, which we are working on at the CPSC this fiscal year. And before we get started, a quick disclaimer: this presentation was prepared by CPSC staff and may not necessarily reflect the views of the Commission. All right, so I'm hoping that this shows up somewhat well on your screen. Before we start talking about what the new system is going to contain, we thought we'd just start with a look at where we are and where we're going. On the left-hand side of your screen is the existing system. So if you are a firm that reports to the CPSC under Section 15B for a potentially hazardous product, and you do so online, you're familiar with the system that shows up on the left-hand side of your screen. On the right-hand side of your screen is actually where we're going. And a few features that I'll highlight here just for our discussion is the new system should look more streamlined to you. There's a menu on the left-hand side of that screen that is going to show you, hopefully you can see 2 green dots and then a yellow dot. The yellow dot is actually where you are in the process, and the gray dots are what's to come. So we're doing this so visually you're cued that you have a few more sections left before you can actually hit the submit button. Another benefit of the system on the right-hand side that we're working towards is we're going to have hover over text, which will show as a question mark. And there's a hazard description box that actually has a question mark and a pop-up that's showing to the far right. Those hover over text or question marks are meant to inform what we're actually looking for from you. So if you aren't sure when completing this, you can hover over the text and it'll give you a bit more of a visual cue.
So stopping sale continue. Go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to say one thing that we've done is we've broken the system, the existing system, which asks for the initial report information and the full report information into 2 separate segments. And the first part is the initial report. We'll still be asking for all the information that's shown on your screen, those check marks. And the good news is you'll have an opportunity to review all the content that you're about to submit to us and provide additional comments to the CPSC before you submit. And this comes straight from our regulation that's cited on the screen. So now I'm going to turn it over to Phil, who's actually going to talk about kind of the meat and potatoes, more in-depth part of the online filing portal.
Thank you, Shelby. So stopping sale continues to be a main requirement to participate in the Fast Track program. The new business portal will have the functionality of a guardrail checkpoint at this step. If the firm has not yet stopped sale, the firm will be unable to proceed forward submitting their Fast Track report in the new business portal without this requirement being met. Also new to the remedy section, we have added another guardrail checkpoint for the time frame that the remedy will be available to consumers, as well as requiring technical documents related to a repair or replacement to be submitted, which will ultimately streamline the time to recall. Templates of social media posting and press releases will be located inside of the new portal and will automatically pre-populate with information based on the firm's report, eliminating repetitive data input for users. Finally, instead of a single upload button in the attachment page, the new business portal will intuitively ask for only certain documents that are required depending on the type of recall. This will greatly enhance the attachment page functionality to more accurately fit the scope of the recall. Detailed templates will also be available on this page, and upload buttons will be located directly next to each required documents, providing users a clear roadmap for submission. In summary, a submission in the new business portal is done in 2 steps: initial report followed by additional information. The initial report process will be significantly simplified and will lessen the burden for firms to fulfill their initial reporting obligation. The improved business portal will also be mobile friendly, no longer requiring the use of a desktop computer. A PDF copy of your report will also be able to be easily downloaded at the end of the report submission as well. Finally, there will be auto-generated emails and reminders built into the system that will allow CPSC and the user to seamlessly communicate timeframe reminders and updates throughout the recall process. Back to you, Shelby.
All right, so with that, we're going to open it up to questions. And we already have some questions, my fellow panelists. Okay, so I've got one for Joe Martiak. It's about social media. Can you talk about the effectiveness of social media? Do you have ways to measure behavior changes beyond engagement on social media?
That's a great question. Obviously, the most important thing is to start to attract them to it and then to inform them. And ideally with the engagement numbers that tells us they did something with it. They either retweeted it, they liked it, they forwarded it to someone else. And so they interacted with the message. As far as them taking the message and then implementing that safety feature, that's the rub. That's the challenge we have right now. And the best way to do that would be through either focus groups or through surveys. When we do surveys, it is a costly as well as a time-consuming period. For example, the survey for Anchor, it took almost 2 years for us to get it cleared through OMB and get the thing moving. But it's incredibly important information. So we're going to be looking into how can we tap into that somehow through informal focus groups or some other mechanism to actually find out, did people act on it? Now, I will say anecdotally, we do get people on social media who make a comment and then they say, for example, about recalls and signing up for them. One person signed up and then he, in his comment online, he said, and lo and behold, he said, I've got this very product here sitting in my house that I just read about. So that's when they tell us that they acted. But we need to find out a way to talk to them to see if they actually follow through.
All right, thank you, Joe. We've got another question, and this is actually about the Fast Track portal, and I will direct it to Phil. The question is, will the new portal allow free text entries for explanatory text, reservation of rights, etc.?
So yes, the new portal will allow for free text entries. And what we've done here is focused on the specific questions where we feel that more explanation is necessary, is needed, and we've allowed you those free text boxes. We're not limiting you to 180 characters like Twitter or anything. We will provide you enough space there to adequately explain the situation, the remedy, the hazard, or things like that.
We do have another question about the portal, and it is, which I'll take. It's, will the new portal be easily exportable, such as to a PDF, or will it be proprietary like Health Canada's? The answer is, if you're asking about whether or not your submission will be exportable, it will absolutely be exportable. You'll have the option, you know, we talked about at a high level, the system's going to be broken into 2 parts, the initial report, those 5 pieces of information, and you submit then. And if you have the additional information, you can also submit that then. At each step, you will be able to download your submission before submitting it. You'll also, Phil talked about automated emails. You're also going to get an automated email that will show you what has been submitted, and it will have that PDF there. So with that, I think we are up on our time. So I am going to turn it back over to the nice folks at ICPHSO. Thank you so much to my fellow panelists and to everybody for your great questions.
And the panelist. Next, we will hear from Rob Kay, the Director of Compliance and Field Operations, who will give an update from the Office of Compliance. Rob?
Hi, everybody. Good morning. Thanks so much for having me. I think I'm up here, although I still see some of our prior panelists. There we go. It's great to be here to provide a compliance update. A few things I want to touch on this morning, and then I'll also be available for questions as part of the next panel. I want to follow up a little bit on what Phil and Shelby just presented with respect to the work that's ongoing with the new Fast Track portal. I also want to speak to the progress we've made in the restructuring and compliance that we introduced last year, let folks know how that's going, and also walk through a little bit for those who are less familiar with compliance, how we're set up, and then finally also address some additional changes we've made to enhance our ability to address the continuing growth of e-commerce. So first of all, with respect to the Fast Track portal, and I want to start off just by thanking Shelby and Phil as well as Blake Rose, who have been spearheading the development of the new portal. This is really a project that is aimed to bring Fast Track, into the 21st century, so to speak, to put it on a technological platform and move away from what I think in some respects is really more of an ad hoc process right now. I'd ask everyone to keep your eyes out for a feedback session, which I'm sure will be virtual, that we're looking to set up this spring, where we'll go into a little more detail of how the Fast Track portal is shaping up and welcome your feedback. One of the key attributes that we're aiming for here is really to make this a user-friendly system that folks will look at as being easy to use and beneficial for processing these cases as expeditiously as we can. A hallmark of the changes is to create greater standardization, particularly with respect to how the information comes in, making that less ad hoc. In the process, we'll be establishing a standardized starting point for fast track cases when we have the core information that's needed to bring these cases to recall quickly. And that's going to enable us, I think, to be more predictable about how long it will take to get these recalls out in the street, and I think better equip us to help Fast Track live up to its name and get these cases out quickly. As Phil mentioned, there's going to be a number of bells and whistles that I think will streamline the process, including the pre-populating of information and certain documents like the press release document. And there will be added functionality to the extent that folks also register as business portal users. You won't have to be a business portal user to use the new Fast Track portal to put your information in, to get email updates and feedback, but there is some additional functionality that comes with being a business portal user. Certain information will automatically populate that you've previously put into the portal, such as firm information. You'll get updates on the progress and the predicted date of release. You'll be able to see past submissions in the business portal. So there's some synergy there and some reasons why I think it makes sense to consider being a business portal registrant. But again, you won't have to be a business portal registrant to use the portal. So again, I think we're excited about rolling this out, going into the build out as the year progresses, and hopefully rolling this out in a way that, as I say, improves the usability and brings us into the 21st century with Fast Track. The second thing I wanted to talk about is, as I said, an update with respect to some of the changes in compliance that we implemented last year. And I'll do that as I sort of walk folks through how we're set up, especially for those of you that may not be familiar with how we are organized in compliance. You heard from Phil, who is our Fast Track supervisor and works in the purple group there on the left of the slide, our resource management division under Blake Rose's leadership. These are folks that support a wide variety of activities in compliance. Of course, they manage the Fast Track program, but they do a lot more than that. They do a lot of data analysis and reporting in furtherance of our mission. They monitor our performance metrics. They're also taking on the leading role now in our recall monitoring, where we need to follow up on recalls after they've been issued. And so a lot of important work takes place in CRM. The green boxes there in the middle are where we made a lot of our changes as part of the restructuring last year. That's our new enforcement and litigation group under the leadership of Mary Murphy, who came to us from the General Counsel's office, Howie Tarnoff, who many of you know has been a mainstay in compliance for many years and is Mary's deputy, as well as Leah Ippolito, who also came to compliance from the General Counsel's office. We've done a tremendous amount of hiring in compliance. I think we've hired over 15 people in general over the last year, including 9 new compliance attorneys. For those of you who have been engaged in hiring and onboarding over the past year in the COVID environment, I don't think I need to tell you how challenging that can be, and I just couldn't be more pleased and proud of our staff in the way that they've executed in the hiring process and brought some terrific folks on board, really made them feel part of the team and gotten them onboarded and gotten to work already. And I think that the new division is really now just starting to hit their stride. I think there's more hiring to come. We're not fully staffed to where we expect to be, but we are already seeing a lot of work getting done that, frankly, a few years back we just weren't as equipped to do, and that really is a testament to the efforts, among others, of Mary, Howie, and Leah. This new enforcement division, I think, in broad strokes, has 3 primary responsibilities. One is to enhance our ability to handle complex investigations of substantial product hazards, cases that often can have the most substantial impact on product safety in a more efficient way, both for the benefit of consumers where action is necessary and also to the benefit of firms where we can make decisions not to proceed when appropriate in an expeditious manner. And I think we're already starting to see great work in that area. The second priority for enforcement and litigation, which Chairman Adler touched on in his remarks, is our civil penalty program. I'll start off by, along the same lines of what Bob was saying, that this is a program that is premised on the idea that there's just an enormous volume, enormous jurisdictional coverage of the products out there under our jurisdiction. And I think that's why the statute is set up the way it is, that firms have a responsibility when they have the possibility of a substantial product hazard to report that so-called needle in the haystack of consumer products to us. And it's why the agency's motto for many years, and something I've heard Bob say many times, is when in doubt, report. By doing that, you are in no way signing up for a recall. The statistics bear that out, but what you are doing is eliminating the possibility that we will be coming back behind you and looking at whether your reporting was timely. And I do believe that part of our work is a critical part of making sure that core part of our overall safety structure, which is so dependent on firms meeting that obligation, is adhered to. And I do expect that will remain a priority as we move forward. As Bob referenced, we have had a couple of significant announcements recently, and I expect us to continue to devote resources to that part of our work. This group is also providing support to our regulatory division, which I'll talk about next. I think their partnership is working together really great. There are often legal issues that come up in their work and complexities that, by working together, we can make things happen in a more robust and efficient way. And under Jennifer Timian's leadership, working alongside her managers, Sean Keller and Carolyn Manley. This is the orange boxes I'm addressing now. These are the folks that are working with our port staff and getting domestic samples to make sure we're enforcing the specific regulatory performance requirements for those products that have those requirements under our jurisdiction. Like the rest of the organization, they are heightening their attention to e-commerce in light of the tremendous growth in online marketplaces, from everything from toys to bike helmets to infant durable products. That will continue to be a focus of compliance in general and regulatory in particular, as they work with our import team and with our field staff in examining both imported samples as well as domestically gathered samples to make sure that we are taking a hard look at products subject to our regulations. So that's a good segue to talk a little bit about our field team. Under Bev Cohen's leadership and her deputies, Justin McDonough and Kevin Barton, these folks are supporting all aspects of compliance's operations, as well as a lot of our standards work in EXHR through by conducting in-depth investigations of consumer incidents, business inspections, backing up our port team at the ports. You can see there's a lot of boxes here. That's because these are folks who are stationed around the country, working out of their homes, able to geographically address product safety issues as needed. A couple of aspects of their work that I wanted to highlight today. In particular, some of the changes we've made with our internet surveillance unit, which you can see is now a team unto itself within the field under a single manager. Bob Hull is the manager now, taking over that leadership post. In light of the exponential growth in e-commerce and the important role ISU plays for us, we have consolidated them on one single team so that they can both implement and plan to help us meet the challenges of e-commerce. They do a number of things that are important to our e-commerce operation, ranging from surveilling possible violative and recalled products online, collecting samples for technical analysis, preserving websites, identifying sellers when sometimes it is not clear on its face from an internet site who is selling a particular product, as well as conducting analysis of online incidents to help us focus our enforcement activities. So I expect that group to continue to play a leading role in helping us address the challenges of e-commerce going forward. I also wanted to point out that our state and local programs office is located in the field under the leadership of Denise Beatty. They work closely with our Office of Communications to coordinate with state and local partners, and particularly focus on making sure that our safety messaging is getting out to communities around the country, including underserved, vulnerable population communities, seniors, children, families, particularly in economically challenged areas that may not have ready access to the important safety messaging that the Commission puts out with respect to safety that we want consumers around the nation to have, regardless of those circumstances. So a lot going on in compliance. Very appreciative of the support of the Commission, of Mary Boyle and Dwayne Ray in the Executive Director's Office to our changes and to some of the initiatives that are ongoing. And I'm very excited about the progress we've made and the continuing progress I think that we expect to make with some of the changes that we've implemented over the past year. And with that, I'll leave it to the folks back there whether to open it up for questions for me now or just move to the next panel, and I'd be available to take questions then.
Thanks, Rob. And back by popular demand, in our next and final CSPC session, well, a little tongue twister there. Our final session with the CPSC is Ask the CPSC, which we moderated and introduced by Dwayne Ray, who is a Deputy Executive Director for Operations at the CPSC. Dwayne, take it away.
Thanks, Andy. Good morning, everyone. It's good to be back at ICPHSO, even in a different view this time. This morning, I'm honored to moderate this panel of CPSC leaders, and we wanted to spend some time sharing a little bit about our priorities and activities for this year. And then at the end of that session, we'll open it up to questions through the app. I did notice there were some questions already on Rob, so I'll tee those up for Rob while everyone's going through their talking points. But I'd like to start off with Dwayne Boniface. Dwayne is our Assistant Executive Director for Hazard Identification and Reduction. Dwayne?
Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity here. As head of the Office of Hazard Identification and Reduction, EXHR, I've got the advantage of not only a great team, but also a fairly clear target, as much of our work is laid out in the Commission's annual operating plan. I'll highlight a few pieces here. Some of this is going to overlap what the acting chair and the executive director covered this morning, but I'll touch through some of those in any event. In the area of data, as Mary Boyle noted earlier, we're working on an action plan for the NICE sample modernization. NICE is really a cornerstone for us for our data-driven approach, enabling nationally representative statistical estimates of consumer product injuries. So we're excited about moving forward with that. Last year, we published data tables from the Clearinghouse online for download. In the coming weeks, we're going to be introducing a queryable online portal that will allow people to access those data more directly and interface with them. In the area of analytics, a lot of great work going on, working to strengthen or expand our analytic capabilities. Included with that, we've added Dr. Tony Cassikert to the EXHR team as our Chief Data Analytics Officer, and we're working to expand our artificial intelligence and machine learning capabilities there. Voluntary standards, as was noted earlier, it's a core activity for EXHR and vital for CPSC, allowing us to expand our talent numerically by engaging with key stakeholders, manufacturers, retailers, consumers, and other stakeholders in developing voluntary standards and advancing safety in 78 different areas this year. One recent addition to this area that I wanted to highlight is in the area of artificial intelligence. Here we've added Nevin Taylor to the EXHR team as our chief technologist, focusing on artificial intelligence and machine learning in consumer products. And we're hosting a forum on that actually next week, March 2nd. Details are posted on the Federal Register and on our website. In the area of mandatory standards, the acting chair and Mary Boyle covered some of those, but a number of important rulemaking projects this year, including infant sleep products, crib bumpers, furniture tip-over, magnets, and window coverings. Product test and evaluation, as Rob noted earlier, we do an awful lot of work in support of the Office of Compliance and in support of Jim and the Office of Import Surveillance, providing a strong technical basis for dealing with unsafe products in the marketplace. And in the area of technical support, we're working with our partners in OCM to strengthen information and education campaigns, leveraging the research and analysis that we've done. An example where we have done so, we've helped target COVID safety messages on emerging hazard patterns and trends starting in summer 2020. So just a brief highlight of things we've got going in fiscal year 21.
Thank you, Dwayne. At this point in time, I'd like Jim Jaholski to give an update. Jim is the Director of Office of Import Surveillance. Thank you, Jim.
Thanks, Dwayne. And thank you, everyone, at ICPHSO for having me again this year. I wanted to talk highlight three priorities that our office is working on right now. Both Mary and Bob mentioned the recent port surveillance legislation that was signed into law at the end of 2020. We are actively working on all the aspects of that legislation. In part, the legislation calls for CPSC to maximize our presence at the ports during the pandemic. And we are doing that by getting our import staff back at the ports and by increasing our examination of incoming cargo. We are also working very closely with our colleagues in the Field Investigations Division of the Office of Compliance to expand coverage at ports where CPSC does not normally have staff co-located with CBP. So this is really looking to expand our reach in terms of identifying high-risk shipments and being able to do in-person exams. So we really appreciate the work with Rob and his team to be able to get our domestic field investigators out to the ports. We are also focused on drafting a report to Congress, which is due to be submitted at the end of June. The report's going to cover a lot of ground, and we will include a long-term vision for CPSC's import surveillance program, including how the agency will address the risks associated with e-commerce. Some of you may remember that at last year's ICPHSO event, I highlighted the research that our office had been doing and the planning that we had been doing around e-commerce. So we really do feel that we are well positioned to put a plan to address de minimis e-commerce shipments in place pretty quickly. Another priority, Mary also mentioned the recently commission-approved e-filing project. For those of you who are not familiar with e-filing, it's a program that will allow CPSC to electronically collect certain data associated with certificates of compliance at the time the entry is entry is filed with CBP. So this data, we really look to enhance our import risk targeting to be able to identify those companies and shipments that present a greater risk so that we can stop them at the ports. E-filing is a concept we developed and piloted several years ago and then conducted a follow-up certificate of compliance study. Background documents and all the work that we've done on e-filing are available on our website, and would encourage you to take a look at that as part of the new initiative that we'll be working on. And the e-filing project we do look at as being a multi-year project. We will be developing a detailed project plan, and of course we'll be engaging with you, the trade, and soliciting input throughout the process. And the third area that I'd like to address briefly is our ongoing deployment and development of functionality in our RAM system that will facilitate communication with Customs and Border Protection and the trade. This includes two main items, electronic messaging that we have put in place with CBP and with customs brokers that allows us to more efficiently coordinate hold requests and exams at the ports. And then we have some upcoming functionality that's in development now that will allow us to electronically transmit import-related forms and requests for information to the trade. So we're excited about both of those, and we do think that they will help us become more efficient and effective. So those are, that's a brief overview of some of our big priorities for this year. And I hope everyone stays safe and healthy, and I'll turn it back over to Dwayne.
Thanks, Jim. Now I'd like to introduce Jen Sultan, who is our acting general counsel, for any opening comments.
Morning, everyone. As you heard earlier from Mary Boyle, I am currently serving in the acting general counsel position. Gabe Mullen recently retired. And just some of the sort of priorities for us are ensuring a smooth transition during this time. Also making sure to provide the necessary legal support for some of the priorities that you heard discussed earlier today. And then also me personally, just given my role in compliance as the deputy, to ensure and to foster continued collaboration between OGC and compliance in particular, but of course with all the other parts of the agency. And just for some very broad brushstrokes, what does OGC do? At a very high level, we provide legal support for rulemakings. We provide legal support for matters that are referred to DOJ, also defensive litigation, including challenges to rulemakings. And also we provide agency-wide legal support on general law, FOIA, jurisdictional, statutory, and regulatory determinations. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jen. Rob, I know you introduced yourself on the last slide. If there's anything else you wanted to add before we go to questions, I'm happy to have you say anything.
Thanks, Dwayne. No, I think I'm ready to hear the questions.
Okay, well, great. Well, first one's teed off for you. Will you make the CPSC compliance organizational chart available in the ICPHSO material, as CPSC always used to do? It's very useful.
Yeah, I don't see any reason why we wouldn't. We want people to understand, where the folks they're dealing with fit into the organization, and I think, assuming we've done that in the past and it doesn't present any information sharing issues, which I don't think it does, be happy to do that.
And this one's a little variant on that, Rob. CPSC used to publish a directory of various staff and their areas of responsibility. This helps get information. Why stop? How can we find such information?
I'm happy to look into that. One of the things that we did when we did the reorganization or the restructuring was in our new enforcement and litigation division in particular. Folks are a little less product specific in terms of the nature of the work that they're doing. The substantial products hazard standard is a broad one, and we found people can work very effectively across a range of product. We are still more product specific in terms of our organization in the regulatory section, and happy to look into how we can make those folks' specialties available if that would be helpful to folks.
Okay. I'm going to try to pick one for Dwayne Boniface just to give Rob a break for a minute. Let me make sure. Why is staff not able to answer questions on experimental testing and results during active rulemaking? Would be helpful during standard development.
Yes, good question. We often share results as they become available. A key part of that, though, is sort of when does that work complete? And so as we're in a rulemaking process for some of these areas, we're continuing to analyze the results. And so the research doesn't really finish until we're putting the results of that effort forward, typically in a briefing package to the Commission.
Okay. We got a few more here. This one, I believe, is on proposed legislation, COVID legislation. This one might be a Jen question. Please comment on, and we may not be able to answer all of this, the provisions in the COVID legislation, what these products are, and how they are distinct from FDA or EPA, FIFRA regulated products.
It's not clear from this question if this is about, if this is what are COVID products. So I think there's a little bit more that's missing from the actual question. But to the extent that, there's a question about what does a definition mean, I believe there's some definitions in this legislation to refer to. So I'm sorry, I can't do a better job here, but there may be some interpretation that will happen even with or without definitions.
Okay. All right, we're back to Rob again. Will fast track still involve weeks or months of iterative, non-substantive exchanges that only serve to delay recalls?
Boy, that's not a very friendly question, Dwayne.
I can say it friendlier. Will fast track be faster?
Clearly, despite the fact that sometimes people think that government tries to work to a bureaucratic reputation, that really couldn't be further from the truth. And the whole portal project is geared towards trying to streamline and standardize and use technology to avoid those kinds of pitfalls. I can't promise, especially as we start rolling, that there won't be bumps in the road for us to work past, but clearly the goal is to make things as unified, streamlined, and absent of those kinds of things as we can.
Okay. Jim Jaholski, I'm looking for one for you, but I don't. No one's asking them yet. Sorry. This one I think is really kind of a Rob one again. It seems CPSC is shifting its policy on scope of information submitted pursuant to Section 15. Please explain CPSC's policy and how it is within agency authority.
I'm not sure I fully understand the question. I don't think we intend, as part of the fast track portal, to in any way change policy with respect to disclosure. Absent legislative change or a significant policy change, which I would expect would be communicated, I think the information will still be treated in the same way, albeit submitted electronically. Do you think that got at the question, or?
Yeah, it's hard to, without actually having a little bit more detail on there. Let's see, this one, given CPSC's troubled history of protecting confidential information, should it be more judicious in demands for things like consumer PII and medical info? I think that's along the same lines of Section 15 questions for you, Rob.
Well, I think it's fair to say, I think it's accurate to say that CPSC is an agency that, in part because of Section 6B, takes its responsibilities with respect to information protection when appropriate very, very seriously. To the extent that there have been any issues, I know that there's been extensive efforts to address them. And I think that, it remains a priority for us to do all of our activities lawfully in accordance with the law. There is information that we require in compliance and which our regulations and the statute make clear firms are obligated to provide, including consumer information such that we can properly investigate incidents. And we do expect firms to provide that information while at the same time we hold ourselves to the standards of protecting information required by our statute.
Okay. Looks like we've got another one on, this one how does continuing uncertainty in commission slots affect staff morale and effectiveness? Does anybody on the panel want to take that one on? Rob, you've been doing all the talking. Happy to open it up to anybody else on the group.
Yeah, I can jump in. I think that certainly, as Mary Boyle noted in her remarks, we've had a tremendous amount of churn over the last year as staff have dealt with both personal and CPSC impacts of the coronavirus epidemic. Certainly, the gaps at the commission add to that.
Okay. We have one for Jim Jaholski. What does your team have the ability to search for more than lead and tracking label violations? What other kind of violations are they looking for?
Yeah, thanks for the question. Yeah, we do. We're looking for, basically our approach is anything that we can identify at the ports where we can make a screening determination that there's a potential violation, then that's in play for our investigators to look at. So lead is a big one. We have an XRF device that is really a great screening tool for us to be able to detect lead. We have an FTIR device that we use for phthalates. We are also looking and screening for ASTM F963 violations. We are looking for other types of regulated violations, lighters, bike helmets, 15J rules as well, the 415J rules. So it's a wide breadth of things that we're looking for. In the end, our philosophy, though, is if we are screening a product looking for a significant violation, But we determine as part of that examination that a product has not been certified or does not have a tracking label, we do feel an obligation to move forward and document that and refer that over to the Office of Compliance for evaluation. So, I think we do not see the high levels of lead ppm violations that we had seen early on after CPSIA, but we do still detect those violations and take action on them.
Great, thanks, Jim. I'm going to keep you there while your mic's hot. Are there any specific parts of the country or types of import activities where you guys are planning to staff up?
Yeah, I think the recent port surveillance legislation makes it clear that Congress wants us to focus on de minimis e-commerce shipments. So I see as resources become available that we will be expanding to places where e-commerce arrives. So that's going to be your large express carrier hubs. Those are going to be other large airports where high volumes of e-commerce arrive, plus international mail facilities as well. So those staffing up in those locations is going to be part of our plans. In addition to, as resources become available, continuing to increase staffing at what we call sort of traditional ports of entry, where your containerized cargo is coming into the country. These would be seaports, truck crossings, some airports as well. We will be looking to expand in those locations as well. So really an overall plan to grow the import surveillance division office.
Great, thanks, Jim. This one's for Dwayne. What can we expect at the upcoming AI forum next week?
Great question, and appreciate the interest. We've really got an exciting slate of topics and speakers for that. I think there are many on this webinar that are participating. We've got NIST coming in to talk about policies and guidelines that they've been working on. We've got some academic presentations from Penn State, Harvard, and the University of Nevada talking about artificial intelligence, its use, and the application of standards. European Commission doing the same. We've got consumer groups coming in to help talk. And then we've got groups such as Underwriters Laboratories, Bureau Veritas, and others coming in to talk about the sort of the nuts and bolts. How do we deal with this new technology? How does it impact our testing work? How does it impact, or how should it impact our standards development and so forth? So really an exciting day laid out. I do hope that as many people attend that as can.
Okay, this question's for Jim. Does the report to Congress include recommendations from CPSC as to how e-commerce only platforms will be brought into the same obligations as brick and mortar?
No, I think that's going to be outside the scope of what Congress is asking us to do as part of the report. There are several aspects of what we need to respond to in the report. That is not one of them. It's mainly going to be looking back at kind of what the agency did during COVID, especially when we did not have staff at the ports for a period of time, and a big focus on what our future plans are to address de minimis. But I don't believe that is going to be one aspect that we will be dealing with in the report.
Okay. Rob, this one is an enforcement question. What are the enforcement plans for COVID-related products? The new non-medical mask standard and products like paint sprayers being repurposed as disinfectant?
Yeah, I don't think I can answer the question with respect to any specific product. What I can say is that, our regulatory work is always focused on a risk-based manner, wanting to look at products that present heightened risk, and certainly to the extent COVID has introduced new products or has led to some products to be much more widely consumed. That's something that we want to look at, and that I expect we will look at as we continue to move through this COVID period.
Okay. Kind of on that theme, Dwayne, with the recent publication of ASTM F3502 barrier face mask, does CPSC foresee enacting this voluntary standard as mandatory?
Certainly, it's something we'll look at. I would note that that ASTM standard does incorporate some of CPSC's regulations on the flammability piece, 1610 and 6 in particular. So there's already some regulatory overlap there. But we'll take a look at that. Much of that standard is focused on issues outside of our jurisdiction, though.
Okay. Rob, this is another compliance question. Why does CPSC refuse to share PSAs with companies? Wouldn't sharing promote quicker resolution and due process?
I think that's a great question. There are reasons related to potential administrative litigation that we don't share the PSA. That does not mean that we were trying to hide the ball in any way with respect to our technical conclusions. We frequently will provide written summaries of what's in PSAs, and have often made technical staff available to firms to ask questions about our conclusions. It is not our intention, because I agree with the premise of the question, that when there's an information sharing going on where everybody is aware of the a common platform of facts and each side's assessment of those facts, I think that does hasten decision making on both sides, and it is our intention to do that with the hope that we can reach resolution in cases that have evolved to that point.
All right, we've got a few more minutes here. Seems like, Rob, you're very popular on this question list, so let me try this one. Can a manufacturer report via email on 15B if portal information is not available? Otherwise, it may cause a reporting delay.
I'm not sure exactly what it means by portal information being unavailable. With respect to the initial reporting component of the portal, we're aiming to do that in a way that would facilitate a report even when limited information is available. And I think that that's something that we've had focus on, and would welcome further comment on at our feedback session with respect to that. I do think it's important that we don't do anything that would make it harder for firms to submit initial reports when they think they may have identified a safety problem. That's definitely not the intention of the new portal.
Yeah, and I guess I kind of read it a little bit as if the portal's having problems, can you email it still as kind of like a backup? And I don't think we discourage that, but I think we're trying to encourage the use of the portal so that it is, in through that system and getting the information together to act on.
What we all know from our experiences over the last year, that technology never fails. So you can always count on the technological submission, but I'm sure that in the event that that's not available, we'll have some alternative means. But again, we are trying to bring us into a 21st century technologically based system.
Great. Well, I think we are at the end of our time. I appreciate my fellow panelists here and presenting and asking these good questions. I think at this point, we're done from our CPSC day presentations, and thank everyone for engaging.
Thank you to all the CPSC participants. We certainly appreciate the time and effort you took to be here and participate with all the product safety stakeholders. If you have any additional questions, please send to sbo@cpsc.gov, and they will be directed to the appropriate office.